While India will be a strong voice for the Global South at the G20 Summit in Brazil while aiding the host nation in reaching consensus on contentious global issues ranging from conflicts in West Asia and Ukraine, also balancing economic growth with sustainable development. India's ambassador to Brazil, Suresh K. Reddy, tells DD India's Gautam Roy that several bilateral, plurilateral and other engagements are also planned during the Prime Minister's stay in Rio de Janeiro, including with his Brazilian counterpart, President Lula. Take a look.
The G20 Summit is being held in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be taking part in it, having hosted the New Delhi edition last year. We have with us Ambassador Suresh Reddy, India's ambassador to Brazil, with us to talk about what's on the agenda and what else could be there on the sidelines of the summit as well. Thank you for speaking to DD India, Ambassador. What can you tell us about the agenda that Brazil has? How close is it to India's heart? How well aligned is it with what India had last year? And will Prime Minister Modi be bringing an India perspective to the proceedings as well?
Thank you. Thank you. Namaskar to everybody. This is a very important summit because what Brazil is trying to achieve is to build on our success. And as you are aware, India's presidency has been unique because it has been unique, number one, it has been able to actually put focus on the issues which the developing countries are facing. And number two, it has been able to, for the first time, add a new member to the G20. If you recall, from 2008, there has been no addition to the G20. And so this was the first time we had African Union become a member. And that is a very significant achievement by itself. And number three, we are able to achieve consensus on all the issues. And I think it reflected the stature of India. It reflected the fact that today India's position is such that all countries are willing to partner with India in finding global solutions. Our focus was on sustainable development in addressing the challenges of socio-economic inclusion. And Brazil, they're building on the same approach. Our theme was on one earth, one world and one family. Fundamentally emanating from the belief that it's a Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, right? And Brazil is also building on the same, to build a just planet supported by sustainable development. That is what they are working on. And their priorities also same, aligned with our priority. Like for example, Brazil is now introducing a new initiative called the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, which is naturally globally a very, very important topic, but on which India has already been taking the leadership through its presidency, where it again kept a focus on this challenge. So there are many areas in which we are working together. But an important area, India's leadership was evident, and in which Brazil is now building upon, is in the disaster resilience infrastructure, disaster risk reduction. They are recognizing, our Prime Minister, recognizing the impact of the disasters. So for the first time, we had created this working group called the Disaster Risk Reduction. And we had the first working group meeting, and now Brazil had the first ministerial meeting. So congratulations to Brazil on the success of that, which was a very productive meeting, and in which we have built upon. We have come out with a policy framework on how to deal with the disasters. And today, as you are aware, when you look at the scale of the disasters, abhi har saal it is only increasing, the disasters are increasing, plus पिछले decade and this decade के बीच में तो लगभग it has gone up by 22%. And the cost per year is now today already touching $400 billion. So.
Yes, wonderful. And in terms of, since you mentioned the African Union, the Global South, it will have a larger voice this time around in the summit. How will its interests be furthered? Because India and Brazil are also part of it. So how will the collective interest of Global South be furthered now in this particular summit? It's an
important point which you have raised, because when we talk of Global South and inclusion of African Union, what we need to recognize is that it is not just African Union which has become a member. What we have today is that 55 countries. The voice of 55 countries is going to be reflected in this meeting, number one. And number two, we had very successful Voice of South, the Global South Summit, which we had, the two summits as you are aware. And in the first summit only, we had more than 125 countries participate at the leaders level. And it was very important because the challenges today are met by the developing countries. And in this context, it was important that we make them party to the process. उनसे सुनकर हम क्या कैसे आगे जा सकते हैं. That was the main message. So we listened to them, we incorporated those ideas into it, and part of that process was inclusion of African Union. Now with Brazil also, we are working very closely on this area. And here what is interesting is that India, Brazil and South Africa, as a tri-club, we are काम कर रहे हैं इसमें. So that what we have achieved and what Brazil is building upon, then South Africa can take it forward. So we are working jointly as a team in order to ensure that the global South, their challenges we recognize and we place it in the center of the debate.
Now, compared to last year, even the challenges, global challenges have mounted further. Last time the Ukraine war was there, this time you have to address the issue of the conflict in West Asia as well. Apart from that, cost of living crisis persists, the challenge on the climate front persists. So what kind of a joint consensual approach is the G20 likely to take this time around?
See, there is an increasing recognition that the time has come for them to take the concerns of the global South seriously and start finding solutions. It started, of course, before, but we gave it a push, a strong push during our presidency. And in the case of Brazil, again, they're continuing the momentum. Some of the areas in which we are working upon, one is the debt-related challenges. Today, situation in some countries, the payment of interest on the debt is much more than the budget available, even for developmental activities like health, education, jo bhi hai. And in this situation, we are working with them to see how to help them mitigate this challenge of the debt, number one. Number two, we are also recognizing that we need to create additional funding for development career. And so we have been working jointly to look at strengthening the multilateral development institutions, looking to see how we could do an additional infusion of maybe $300-400 billion, which is a requirement. And there have been very serious discussions happening on that. And third is also the thing of what you call reforms of these multilateral institutions, because we want the voice of South to be reflected in these institutions, and we have been actively engaged with that, and we have been making some progress. Plus, uske alawa bhi, as I mentioned, the challenge of the hunger and poverty. Brazil has been placing considerable focus on this process of addressing challenge, poverty, and inclusive growth, and that has been our theme also of our presidency. And another primary area for Brazil is also, as I mentioned, the reform of the institutions. And third and critical areas, as I mentioned, about how do we make it social equity along with sustainable development. जब हम sustainable development के ऊपर बात करते हैं, we are talking of all facets of sustainable development. We are talking of social, economic,
is a major part of that.
Exactly. So that is what we are working together also.
Okay. And in terms of how it's a place of the gathering of over 40 heads of state and government, what happens at events such as these is a lot of bilateral or plurilateral meetings also take place on the sidelines. So what kind of other meetings is the Prime Minister set to have? What can you tell us about that?
Oh, I mean, as you know, Prime Minister, his agenda is always busy. It is busy also because every leader wants to meet him. Every leader wants to engage with India, and every leader wants to be every country wants to be a partner with India in this process. And here, this year is especially very interesting because this is the first G20 in which so many elections have happened. We have had elections across so many important democracies around the world, and so many of the new leaders who are coming to the summit, they look to Prime Minister, they look to his guidance, and they look to his leadership, and they want to meet him.
Keir Starmer is one of them.
He is as we say, the Indian democracy is the mother of democracies, right? And also, Honorable Prime Minister, he has been one of the senior statesmen participating in these meetings for so many years. And so all the other leaders look up to him, and that is keeping his agenda very busy. There are many bilateral meetings which are happening, and of course, the most important would be with President Lula as a host and as a partner of India, a very important strategic partner of India. And then plus, baki meetings bhi hoga, trica level may bhi hoga. Plus, we are having a few other meetings which are scheduled.
The IBSA is also taking place, I believe.
There will be some meeting. The details are still being worked out by the host government.
All right.
But it's going to be a very busy agenda for Honorable Prime Minister here.
Wonderful, wonderful. We look forward to it. Thank you for speaking to DD and Ambassador Reddy. Well, there you have it. So that's the kind of agenda that India has, which is inclusive, addresses issues that the world faces as challenges right now, and at the same time takes it forward towards the path of sustainable development with the economic growth and addressing even issues of conflict on the global stage. With camera person Loknath, this is Gautam Roy, Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, DD India.